welcome to the birth of a new dimension. My name is Aurora, and on this week's episode and on every week's episode, what I do is I talk about the shape that is called the flying rainbow lasagna. What is so amazing and wonderful about this shape is that it allows each one of us to transform and metamorphosize our DNA. So a big part of what I teach about is that our present DNA structure is not the intended format created by, let's say, the great composer, and the great conductor, the being that said, hey, this is the way I want to structure reality and this is the way I want to structure or organisms, that our DNA in its present state and its present behavior is not conforming to that original vision, that everything has been changed and diminished and diluted and constrained. So we're in this situation right now where our DNA can't act as it naturally would like to act. So DNA is not a static object, it's dynamic, and it has behaviors. And the behaviors are intimately connected to not only your own, conscious thought structure, but also your emotions, your feelings, your emotional tone, and also your flight through time. And this is big because not everybody talks about this, but not only are we submerged within a sea of possibilities and probabilities, like a sea of uncollapsed waveforms, and that our perception and willpower and choice has a lot to do with what we actually collapse and experience as events in reality, but also it is the dance behavior of our DNA that makes us transport our consciousness from moment to moment as we move through time. And that's something that's not recognized yet in terms of conventional science, and it's something that I can simply tell you in terms of my direct perception. And this is what I do with what I call the higher faculties, inner vision, the capacity to see directly. It's like having a big giant telescope that can also be a big giant microscope. And dependent upon what one focuses this apparatus upon, one can learn anything. And the big thing to do for each one of us is to clear or reactivate or reconnect this inner capacity that we have, that is the capacity to see through time. And when I say this, it's like, that's something weird, Aurora. Not normal people are not supposed to see through time. Like, that's not true. Every normal person on this planet and everywhere, we're all supposed to be able to perceive multidimensionally, like see the past and see the future and see how it all intertwines together. Brief pause. So being able to see, all the different possibilities radiating outward in front of you, like an array of timelines and different possibilities, that is supposed to be the way that we travel through time. You're not supposed to be flying blind. So I understand in coming into this world, I didn't understand what it would be like before I came in. I actually did not take a survey. Oh, P.S. I'm, a star person. I'm a galactic walk-in. I'm not the original inhabitant of this physical body in terms of my ego structure and the origins of my consciousness. So yeah, before I came into this body, it's not like I took a survey and who's got the best body that I can get into? Like, what's the most optimum opportunity for me to insert myself into time and experience, Earth's surface reality? No, I didn't do anything like that. What happened was I very spontaneously, and the I in that sentence is the, galactic scale consciousness that is an abstraction. I don't usually have a human female face. I don't usually have a face. I don't usually have something that would be recognized by most of the people at the anthropomorphic level, at the human level, as being an organism, because I usually look like one of the abstractions that I paint. So yeah, I usually look like a big giant, a whole bunch of colors and shapes and forms that have movement and that emit tones, like musical tones. So yeah, it might be hard to personify and understand that that is an actual organism or an entity, and yet it is, and that's usually what I am. So I say, I've written some things on my website sometimes about, not being male or female, and that was heavily misinterpreted. So I had to take that down. But the truth is, where I come from before I was Aurora, or, when I'm not wearing Aurora's persona, I'm not a man or a woman. I'm an abstraction. And it's been quite a wild ride to be in a human female body, especially in this time and place, in this cultural paradigm. I had to learn all sorts of things about the way that females are perceived and about, personal safety. And I just can't even describe it in words. I've had to learn a lot about the way that people preconceive who and what I am just based upon my appearance and gender. I bring that up because the flying rainbow lasagna is the genetic portal or new genetic dance behavior that I did with this body. And the I in that sentence is a galactic abstraction in order for me to be able to come into the cellular structure as consciousness and flap the moving mouth parts and write words and paint paintings and make videos to communicate the ideas that I have. And the idea that I have is this new shape. Basically, all like in terms of mind, the present human operating system, known as the human mind, is severely flawed. And I've used this description many times on this radio show, that it is highly ineffectual. If you look at my studio is pretty clean right now, but sometimes I have like stuff strewn across the floor. There might be like a project that's half done, cardboard packing that's over here in this area, a sweater, a coffee cup. There might be all sorts of obstacles on the floor if you actually want to be, moving across that area of space. And one approach to move across the floor, the obstacle strewn floor of my studio, if you were without physical vision, you could be like, well, we'll use logic and reason. We will reason out like that there's this person that lives in this room, and sometimes this object is over here, but sometimes it's over here. So we'll calculate the probability. What likelihood is there of a coffee cup being within this zone, within this sector? What probability is there of a sweater being in this sector? And all of that is not only cumbersome and laborious, but highly inaccurate. To reason one's way across an obstacle-strewn section of the floor, it's not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is to be able to actually see, to actually use your perception, because sometimes things are not logical. So it could be the middle of the summer and I might have a sweater in the middle of the floor. But if you're using logic, you'd say, a sweater will only be in the middle of the floor if the temperature is below a certain number of degrees Fahrenheit. And a coffee cup will only be in this sector at a certain time of the day, but I might be having an afternoon coffee. Like, you can't use reason when what we really need is perception. So what each one of us needs to do is cultivate the inner capacities and reawaken the inner capacities that are our birthright. That's what I'm trying to say. Being able to perceive time and perceive multidimensionally. That's not just for special people. That's actually for every single one of us. That's the most normal thing in the world. If you want to walk across a room, you should be able to see and sense what is in the room that you are experiencing. And for us, the room is time. The idea that each one of us has to fly blindly through time, making decisions, and some people don't even make decisions. Some people are just like a ping pong ball, like bouncing along, reacting, bouncing, reacting, bouncing. They're not really in control of their flight. And I understand the feelings of frustration, and even like a person might feel embattled and also personally insulted. Like, if you're not in control of your life and you're just a ping pong ball bouncing along in all of these other events, then it might feel very diminishing, like you don't matter. But that's the complete opposite of the truth. The truth is that each one of our individual trajectories through the time field, which timeline you're on, really, really, really matters. So it really, really, really matters, because each one of us is like an individuated red blood cell that is flowing throughout the circulatory system of a much larger being. And in your red blood cell, in your body, with your red blood cells, if you had 60% of your red blood cells not going to where they actually needed to go to perform their actual correct metabolic maneuvers, you'd be sick. That's what we would say. You have a disease. There's something about your system that's not working correctly. Well, what is happening in the time field? The time field is a larger organism that has a metabolism. It's living. It means like the flow of energy, where consciousness is coming from and where consciousness is flowing to. That's like your red blood cells coming from your heart and flowing to your organs and then flowing back to your heart. It matters. Where you're going through time matters. And the more distorted and diverted that each one of our individual lives become, like the more divergent you become from your true path, because there's a true path. It's like if you have a highway in front of you, there's a central lane that is where you're supposed to be driving your car of awareness. And you're not supposed to drive it all the way over to the one side, all the way over to the other side, or drive it into a ditch or hit another vehicle. You're not supposed to do any of that type of stuff. But all of that type of stuff is happening because everyone literally has an obscured windshield. Literally, it's like not being able to see where the road is. They're driving by feel. That's not an effective thing to do. So the most important and powerful thing that we can do as individuals is to reawaken our higher faculties and be able to perceive interdimensionally. And this is, it's part of cosmic partnership, and it's part of gaining, let's say, maturity. And also in this earthly world, like some people think mature is not a good word. And I'm not talking about like the idea of, mature audiences and allusions to sexuality. I'm talking about more like if you call someone mature, it's like, oh, like that guy's old, he's mature, or a woman is mature in her mature years. Like it's not necessarily flattering, but it's actually something really good. Like if you can remember when you were a little kid, when the process of growing up or maturing was something that was embraced. It's like, oh, good, you're getting your adult teeth. Or, oh, good, you didn't used to be able to jump this high or run this far or climb on this part of the jungle gym, but now you can do it because you're growing bigger. Or any of the milestones, like becoming literate or being able to drive a car, like maturing is very good. So I use the analogy that right now, humanity, for the most part, is in its infancy in terms of psychic development. And this is not condescending. I try to take great pains in my creative output, like my videos and everything that I share and everything that I say, not to appear condescending to humanity or to this planet. I recognize that I'm a visitor, like I'm a cultural outsider, and I don't want anyone to feel like that Aurora has come here and that I'm like looking down on you, sneering at the lowly earthlings, laughing at the poor, misguided earthlings. Like, no, it's not like that at all. In fact, what motivated me to come into this human female body and have this experience was the sense that there was great injustice that was happening on this planet, a profound, unfair situation, and that this was my spontaneous opportunity to heal and rectify that situation. And on really higher levels, oops, sorry about that. I'm in my studio and I got this box of colored pencils down there and I'm making noise. In order to really rectify the situation, you have to roll up your sleeves and do it from the first person experience. You can't just do it, distantly, like as if you're on vacation, like I'll just call it in long distance. Be like, oh, I see what's going wrong down there. Just fix this, move this, do this, and say this. It doesn't work that way. In fact, all of this, what all of us are doing here in this physical format, not just me, but all of us, we are all like magicians, natural magicians, not dark magicians, because I speak on a regular basis about dark magic, which is like a satanic technology, satanic meaning a particular race of space-dwelling beings, like non-terrestrial beings, who use technology to distort the time field. And they're not, I'm natural. I'm all natural, guys. Yeah, like I'm all natural. I don't have any fake implants or anything like that. All of my faculties, everything that all my assets, that's the word, all my assets, they're all natural. They did not come from buying them. They came from earned through effort and earned through consciousness cultivation and refinement. And that also means like they're long lasting. No one else can remove them from me, because it's not like, oh, we gave you a microchip in your head, but if we don't like you, then we'll, remove the microchip or disable it or whatever. It's not like that at all. Of course, there are beings that do use technical augmentation in order to amplify their telepathy, and they're a completely different race and a completely different value system and a completely different approach. Like, I didn't fly here in a metal spaceship. I flew here through a genetic portal called the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. That is my starship. So first of all, my value system, no, I don't keep it as a special secret. Like, I'm just going to know about the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. I'm not going to tell anyone else about it. And, you can all just screw yourselves. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is saying, hey, I found and created and innovated this cool new thing. And here's me doing it. Here's me doing it with my body. And that's what I'm trying to say. This is the magic of natural magicians. It's not casting a spell, using Eye of Newt or a magic wand or something like that. It is having a physical embodied presence and then using your consciousness and your willpower and your own innate divine connection to speak your truth, or let's say manifest and express your truth into reality. So whatever are your basic presumptions or basic assertions, it's like a math proof. In a math proof, it's not like 1 + 1 = 2 or 2 + 2 = 4. It's a different level of higher math. I don't pretend to be an expert higher mathematician in earth math. I'm expert in a different form of math. But when you get up to these higher levels of rarefied mathematical expression in the earth system right now, the math proofs look more like statements. Statement 1, statement 2, statement 3, statement 4, and statements 1, 2, and 3 must agree with each other. They can't be in conflict with each other. And then statement 4 is the final thing that you figured out that also doesn't come into conflict with any of the other previously established truths. So a lot of it has to do with like logic and thought structure. And with the Flying Rainbow Lasagna shape, I very much created it along those lines, that it doesn't contravene any of the other previously established truths, which are also like magical spells of natural magicians that have been here for a long time working within the time field. The lasagna doesn't negate or come into conflict with any of those, because it's like we're in a mural, painting a mural, like a very large collective art project, or we're in a symphony. And like, I'm using visual art because I'm a visual artist, but I'm also a musician too. But like, especially with artwork, if someone else already painted blah, blah, blah as the background many hundreds of years ago, you have to somehow integrate your foreground layers with their background layers. Like, you can't just be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to paint whatever I want to, totally willy-nilly, without recognizing all of the other stuff that's already gone on. So that is the real artistry. That is the true genius of what we are trying to do. And it's not just me, it's many people that are here right now in rectifying and healing the time field. Because the time metabolism is out of whack. It is diseased. There's consciousness that is supposed to be able to flow where it wants to flow. And instead of it flowing where it wants to flow, it's been trapped. It's been stuck. And I sometimes say it's like in a little whirlpool or in a little eddy. The truth is, it's nothing as nice as that. It's stuck in like a prison, stuck in like in a battery. There's a really good episode of this silly cartoon show that's called Rick and Morty. So it's got a lot of potty humor, and some things of it are just, ridiculously silly. It also has some profound truth. And there's one episode that's called, I think, The Ricks Must Be Crazy. And the basic premise is the mad scientist named Rick drives this UFO type of fancy car, and his car won't start. And so in order to figure out what's wrong with the battery, like there's no charge in the battery, his battery is made out of a microverse. He made a whole tiny little world, and people live in that little tiny world. And all of their efforts and all of their economy and everything they're doing with their lives is all determined just to make energy for his battery so that he can drive his car around. And so, of course, he, shrinks himself down and sends himself into the microverse in order to see what's going on there. And he set himself up like a god. In that microverse, he's like, I'm your creator. I know everything about you. I made this whole world and everything. Like, it's very profound. That is very similar to what is actually going on in our experience of being in the earthly realm. And the earthly realm is like dense matter, but it's also the level of genetic degradation that we are experiencing right now, wherein we are cut off from divinity. And divinity is not something separate from us. It's not something external. It's not like we pray to an external sky god, a bearded man in the sky, and say, oh bearded man, please, oh please, I want to have, whatever, peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Please give me my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. What's supposed to happen is that when we are embodied in a physical body, we still have our innate divine connection. Because like we have it right now in terms of healing our body. If you cut your finger, you don't die. Most of us don't die. If you cut your finger, most of us, the bleeding stops and the body fights pathogens and the skin cells knit together and heal. And in order to do all of that, it requires life force energy. And that life force energy comes from the divine. In fact, even just being able to conceive a baby and gestate it and give live birth in this time and place is a miracle. And it's quite amazing how, even with the levels of consciousness degradation environmental pollution and genetic degradation, that life still continues. Like, I don't know if I'll say flourishing. I mean, there's certainly proliferation. There's certainly billions of people here. Flourishing would be if all the billions of people were actually healthy. But it's quite amazing that, people gestate and are born, even amidst these huge levels of unconsciousness. It's like everyone here is a deaf musician, not even tone deaf, but for many people, not even able to perceive that they are making sounds. And yet somehow, even amidst in that deafness or insensate, quality of blindness, humans and animals and microbes are still making more life. And so the whole point is we still have part of that innate divine connection. If we had zero connection, we wouldn't be able to heal our finger that gets cut. We wouldn't be able to gestate and give birth. We wouldn't be able to grow up. We wouldn't be able to digest food. We would literally die because we wouldn't have any energy to move through time. So that innate divine connection is also part of what makes us transfer our consciousness from moment to moment and actually flow through time. And the beings that have been harming and oppressing humanity, they are totally disrespectful of what it takes to actually flow through time. They're like gamers. They're like trying to play the system. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about when I say this, but it's like for some beings, it's like if it's a board game, if life's a board game, it's like some people are like, oh, I will read the instructions. I will place all of the little markers on the board in the way it's supposed to be, and I will follow the instructions and, do what I'm supposed to do. And some people will be like, all right, this is the board game. I'm going to read all the instructions. I'm going to try to find the loopholes. I'm going to see if I can find some way to make all of this go in a totally distorted and skewed way in my favor. That's what it is to game the system. So a lot of these beings are like, oh yeah, you're supposed to do all of these certain things in order to have life force energy and be alive and have a cellular structure, but blah, ha, ha, we don't want to do those things. Doing those things is for lame ass losers who actually, are connected to divinity. We don't want to be connected to divinity, but we somehow still want to move through time. And this is what is happening. This is the great challenge that we are facing right now, that the planet has already been invaded. And again, I don't speak about all of this really troubling, negative, information without giving the solution, which is the flying rainbow lasagna. But the truth is, the planet's been invaded. Like, good news, bad news, everyone. The bad news is the planet's been invaded. The good news is that it happened over 5,000 years ago, probably about 10 or 20,000 years ago. And that everything we know as recorded human history has happened post-invasion and has happened under the auspices of these invaders who literally took over your bodies, took over the bodies on this planet, took over the metabolism of time on this planet. And what that really means is your consciousness is supposed to go on a particular flight through time, like a pathway, to go from event to event to event, or even lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. And what these beings did was they said, oh, you're not going to go over there when you're dead. You're going to go over here when you're dead. And you're going to power my battery that powers my little UFO car because, I'm exploiting you. And I'm not going to pay you. And I don't care if you suffer because of it. And also, in the words of this mad scientist, I don't care how badly I'm screwing up the entire metabolism of time by doing this. I'm out for number one. I don't got to care about the whole rest of you all. That's how they're acting. And of course, it's horribly self-destructive. But if we let everything just go to its final denouement, it would be like, oh, look, they were so selfish and so blah, 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 that eventually the entire system was destroyed because they, made all of the time fields so distorted. And like, that would be fine. But then the point is that would be like, they'd be learning a lesson, but then everything would have to die for them to learn that lesson. And that is, hugely self-centered. It's hubristic, to the point of ridiculousness. And it's also infantile. It's very infantile. Like when I say that, what I mean is when a little infant is in a household and the infant has a poopy diaper or they're teething or whatever is wrong with them, they're hungry, they're gassy, they don't like what's going on, they cry and scream and inconvenience the entire household. They're like, I have a little tiny discomfort, I'm going to cry and scream, and I don't care how much that inconveniences everyone else around me. That is literally like an infantile response. These beings, they're like infantile consciousnesses, but not in the sense that humanity is infantile. Like we're learning how to perceive. We're learning how to be telepathic, how to be connected to the reality, higher dimensional reality, how to form a telepathic society, how to use our bodies in a more divinely connected way. Like that's like being a little baby where you're born with a body, but you don't really know how to use it. And you have to learn how to poop, and you have to learn how to crawl, and then you learn how to toddle, and then you learn how to walk, and then eventually, you become adept enough to dance and do all sorts of fancy things and ride a bicycle. These beings are infantile in the sense of their emotional range and their lack of context for what they are doing and how badly it is affecting the entire whole, to the point of being pathogenic. Like, little babies, you're like, they don't know what's going on in the rest of the household. They're just focused on their poopy diaper. But let's talk about like red blood cells. If you had cells in your body that are like, oh, I'm not going to do what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to pick up oxygen from the lungs and bring it over to these organs over here and then go back to the lungs for more oxygen. If your red blood cells are like, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to do something else, you would say not, oh, like they're just infants or they just need to grow up or something like that. You'd say those are pathogenic. You'd say those cells are not working for the entire health and vitality of the entire body. And what you would say to those cells is either get healthy, like do the job you're supposed to do, or get out, because you can't be bringing down the entire system. Because if you let those cells be naughty and do what they're not supposed to do, if you let enough of them do it, then the entire body dies. So this is my motivation. I'm an individual, but I'm also part of a collective. My collective is not the Borg. I had to learn about human Earth surface pop culture references. I used to tell people like, oh, I come from first they'd ask me, what planet do you come from? I'm like, no, I don't come from a planet. And then they started to be more questions like, well, where do you come? I'm like, I come from a consciousness collective. And they immediately jump to like Marxism or something like that. Like it's a collective. You've lost your identity, like a cult, like where you give up your sense of self and you become a conformist and you're like an automaton and you have to listen to some larger being that tells you what to do. It's like, no, it's not like that. It's not a cult. It's not the Borg at all. It's like being a really excellent musician in a really tight band full of other really excellent musicians. So if you're a really great drummer, you don't need to have someone else telling you to how to play the drums or how to keep your beat. You do it. You do your right thing. And if you're an excellent melody playing pianist, you don't need someone else to tell you like, play a C, play an A, play an E, do it like this. You're like, I hear the music. I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm doing it. It's all self-directed is what I'm trying to say. So in my collective, it's like everyone is an excellent artist and musician. Everyone is self-directed. No one needs an external boss telling them, do this, go here, play this. And because we are all so genius and expert virtuosos, we are able to integrate all of our creative expressions harmonically. And that means perfectly nested circles when I use the word harmonically. So it can be perfectly nested sound waves or perfectly nested light waves or perfectly nested, I want to say like time waves, but that's not exactly right. Let's say structures of time, perfectly nested events of reality. Yeah, so being able to perceive with the higher faculties means that you can begin to perceive the structure of cosmic music. It means perceive the events of reality. And for many people here in this time and place, it's like, oh, you can perceive the future? Well, tell me who's going to win the horse race so I can bet on it. Tell me what I should do with the stock market so I know what to buy. They're like, they ask on like the silliest things. And also like, that's like being a prostitute. So the higher faculties, this is like cosmic lovemaking. When you have your giant telescope or your giant microscope, you're supposed to use it so that you can learn and so that you can transform and metamorphosize. It's like, it's why we are here. It's why we're in the time field. And what you're not supposed to do is sell access to it to the highest bidder. That's literally like being a prostitute or like a whore. The idea that some people sell access to their most intimate parts of their body and body processes for money. It's like saying, I know I'm supposed to be doing this with this part of my body over here, but instead this guy's paying me thousands of dollars, so I'm going to do it with this guy over here instead, or this woman, or this person, or this animal, whatever. I know, like some profound distortions are going on in terms of sexuality. Well, using the higher faculties is like cosmic lovemaking. So let's say that there's someone in this time and place, it's very rare for people to have their higher faculties activated. Let's say someone actually has them activated. And then everyone is like, oh, I'm waving my money at you. Like you're a stripper and I'm waving $1. Tell me what's going to happen in my future. Tell me who should I bet on in the horse race? What should I do with my stock market holdings? And that's literally a person that chooses to sell time on their inner telescopes that they can look at someone else's future and tell them what they need is like highly unethical and totally lacks integrity. And so it's also like, I joke about this all the time. I'll save everybody a whole lot of money. If you're ever going to pay for some kind of a past life reading, hypnotic regression, telling you who you were in a past life or anything like that, I'll save you all a bunch of money. Save your $5. You've all been everyone. We have all been everyone, and we all are being everyone concurrently, because it's not a linear journey. It's not like first I was an earthworm, then I was an elephant, then I was a human, then I was this guy, then I was Julius Caesar. It's not like that. It's like you live all of your lives concurrently, just like in a chord, like a musical chord. You play the C, the D, and the E all at the same time. I'm just making up random chords here, but you understand what I'm talking about. You play all the notes at the same time. So we're having these concurrent time experiences that are part of what is the music of time. So you are supposed to use your own highly, refined higher faculties to be able to see down your own road of time. That's what you're supposed to do. It's about you on your personal journey in conjunction with the larger entity or organism within which you are embedded. And that's all. It's not about your mom or your dad or your husband or your wife or your kids or your government or your pope or anything like that. It's your personal journey. So this means all of your insight, all the things that information that you get and that you eat as your wisdom, all of that is supposed to be your personal lovemaking with the cosmos. And to be like, well, I know I'm supposed to be learning this important, soul nourishing information by, telepathically communing with this, higher aspect of self. But instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to sell that time to this guy over here because he wants to know what stocks he should buy. Like that is a horrible transgression. It's like cheating on your spouse. It's like a horrible, I'm not finding the right word, but you know what I'm talking about. Disrespect. It's like saying it's cheap. It's like saying you don't value it. It's like saying it's disposable. And it's also, I had to learn, it's something that is considered to be normal or even laudable in this time and place. That some people are like, oh, I'm a psychic reader. Oh, I'm a channeler. Oh, I'll give you a reading on your future, or I'll read you your past lives, or I'll tell your fortune, or any of those things. Like, it's not a good thing to do. And I mean, like, not trying to offend anybody who does those practices by saying that it's like being a prostitute, but I have to say the analogy stands. And much of it, I mean, when people are groomed for like sexually inappropriate relationships, they're always taught that it's perfectly normal. Like a child bride has to marry some guy that's like in his 40s, 50s or 60s. They're taught like, oh, this is totally normal. It's part of our holy books and it's what we do. Everybody does this. This has been done for hundreds of years. It's normal. Like, that's what people do with the selling of their higher faculties. It's like, oh yes, this is a normal thing to do around here and everybody does it. And it's like, it takes a lot of personal strength and integrity to say, this doesn't feel like it is what I'm supposed to be doing with my natural talents. Let me do what I'm really supposed to be doing with my natural talents. Like, it takes a lot for a person to recognize that, because mostly society will say, good for you, you earned $5 by selling some very private, very valuable aspect of self. Like, now you can pay your rent. Good dog. Before I go too much further afield, what I wanted to talk about was a recent experience, like when I do my Flying Rainbow Lasagna dance and meditation, and I'm connecting with other humans, I'm connecting with other life forms, I'm connecting with all sorts of different consciousness forms here in this time and place, and also elsewhere in other times and places. And that's the way it's supposed to be. This is what one of the things that the Flying Rainbow Lasagna does. It brings together formerly divergent realms. So it means that you can connect yourself, your ego, to the context that you're within in a way that you couldn't before. You can connect with various different lives that you are living concurrently in a way that you couldn't before. You can connect with various different organisms like microbes and giant redwood trees or the planet Jupiter. Like, there's really no limit. It's, just use your imagination and keep on exploring the different things that you can actually connect with. So, we're in this challenge right now of being faced with a lot of mental pollution that comes as the direct result of technology. And the only reason that we have technology on Earth, in our world right now, and why we're using it as domesticated humans, is because our genes have been degraded. If our genetic code were not degraded, we would not need to do things like live in a house with a furnace to keep warm. Like, something, wolves live outside and they have a big, thick, furry coat and they can run around all day long and they don't need to live in a house to stay warm. But guess what? Domesticated dogs, like a little hairless chihuahua, is not made to run around in the woods with they don't have a big, giant, furry coat. They're not going to be able to survive. They need a nice, warm house and a nice little dog bed to sleep in. That is domesticated humanity. Without the higher faculties, humanity was easily domesticated. And humanity then uses technology in order to compensate for the loss of the natural magic that we all have that's now dormant inside of most of us. And that natural magic is the higher faculties. So it's not just information, although information is a big part of it. It's being able to perceive, but there's so many things that can be done with these, there are sensory organs, they're organs for manifestation, they're organs for transferring energy. There's so much that can be done with them. And when they're reactivated and reclaimed, and when you become really good at using them, when you become like a virtuoso, like, no, you don't have to live at the level of being a domesticated human anymore. You can return to your wild, undomesticated format. And what that means is not only no longer external authority figures, like not a king or a sky god or a political hierarchy, none of those people, not a mom or a dad or a school principal telling you what to do, that it is all self-directed, just like I'm saying, like you're a really good musician, you know the notes you're supposed to play, you don't need someone else to tell you. So on the journey towards awakening these higher faculties, here's the challenge. Someone asked me about this on like a post on social media. So they're like, well, there's all these things that are happening right now. Like we have a lot of nanoparticles that are in the air, food, and water, and also unmitigated electromagnetic fields. Like they're wrong notes. It's not good music that's being played out there. It is technologically derived electromagnetic fields that are random, but they're also antithetical to health. That we achieve health, like your biological health of your body and also of your mind and emotions, by your energy system, the way the energy flows through your energy system. And when you change and limit or distort or inhibit or constrain how that energy flows, then it affects the health and vitality of all of your cells. And so this is what's been going on. The pollution affects consciousness, it affects perception, and it affects health and vitality. And so a big part of it is, we not only have electricity and unshielded electrical wires that are creating these electromagnetic fields, but now we have this entire wireless system that is so at odds with the biosphere. It's at odds with every aspect of the biosphere: molecular, microbial, animal, plant, environmental, every aspect about it. It's not by accident that is going on. These are the technological invaders of our planet. They're users of technology themselves. If they did natural magic, they wouldn't have to use technology. So the whole idea is right now we're in this struggle for not only personal freedom, but for the health and vitality and continued life of this entire planet and many other planets and the galaxy and a very, very large system. No pressure though, right? But what we have as our tool is incredibly powerful. And that tool is divine life force energy. So on this planet right now, we've got things like, routers that broadcast Wi-Fi signals and cell phone towers and different things like that. And they definitely are having a negative or harmful impact on, biological cellular structure of humans and many other organisms. But guess what? We've also got the capacity to emit frequencies or vibrations from living organisms that are not only equal to, but are far greater than, far more powerful than the technology-based emanations that have been polluting us. And the reason why they're doing this pollution is they're trying to prevent your maturation process. And this maturation, it's just like sexual maturation, in the transformation from being a child to being an adolescent and then an adult. Part of that is the transformation of the reproductive system to become fully adult. And that, if you wanted to basically this pollution of the mind is trying to prevent humanity as a collective and this planet, as a whole, from maturing, from reaching those levels of inner development that turn us into adolescents and adults who are then empowered, who are then worthy adversaries. Hey, you know something? It's really easy to bully like some little first grader, like whatever, like a little 5 or 6 year old on the playground. Like they have little tiny muscles, they have little tiny everything. They are, very naive. They don't know about a lot of stuff. It's easy to twist their arm. It's easy to steal their lunch money. It's a lot harder to do that to an adult that has a fully formed skeleton. Lots of strong muscle fibers, lots of information about the social structure of the world, like that. It becomes a lot harder to control and limit the behavior of a mature person. And so humanity right now is being severely attacked in its capacity to perceive higher dimensionally and cultivate its perception of higher dimensions. Because once you start to perceive higher dimensionally and the energy starts to come into you, then it starts to grow and it grows your higher faculties. And then you perceive more and more energy comes into you and your faculties grow even more. It's like if you're in a country where there's famine and then someone gives you a little bit of food and it's like, wait, now you've got energy to go out and grow more food. And then you eat more food and then you've got energy to grow more food. It's the way that works. So what these malevolent users of technology have been doing is they've been trying to prevent humanity as a whole from ever reaching those levels of being awakened and empowered so that it's easy to keep on stealing your lunch money. That's the whole point. Keep on preventing your consciousness from going where it truly wants to go. Yeah, no, you're not supposed to endlessly walk in circles on the wheel of time. Like there's, an earth religion that talks all about that. No, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to be able to, come into a physical experience, and it's like going to a restaurant. Go to a restaurant, eat as many dishes as you want to from that restaurant, and then be like, okay, I'm done. I'm full. The food here was very good. Pay your bill and you leave. It would be horrible if it's like, oh, no, you can't actually leave the restaurant. You have to actually sit down again and eat again, whether you want to or not. That is what this whole idea of being constantly recycled or reinserted or reincarnation or whatever, I'm using all these different cultural descriptors to talk about the same thing, the idea that you're stuck in a tiny microverse that's a battery that's powering some, malevolent scientist's silly car so that he can drive around and whatever, buy ice cream or something like that. It's not you doing what you really need to do in order to be part of the larger time metabolism. When everybody is doing what they really need to do, it's like the most amazing symphony. It's beyond clockwork. It's like, when I say clockwork, it's like all of the gears fit together. Everything is timed perfectly. I use the example of also trapeze artists. Like one guy swings into the other guy's arms and then swings that guy into the next guy's arms. And it's a perfect timing is everything. That's the whole point. And distorting timing, like let's say you got a bunch of trapeze artists and then you distort the timing, then it's like, oops, I know I just swung over here. There's supposed to be a guy that's supposed to catch me. He didn't actually catch me. That is a very deadly situation. So this is what we're trying to be, perfect acrobats in this very distorted time field. It's hugely, hugely challenging. So yeah, first, I always give encouragement to everyone because I know how hugely challenging it can be. And also I'm here too. I'm embedded in all of these challenges that everyone is feeling. That's why it's not fair to be like, oh, look, the poor suffering earthlings. I'll just wave my magic wand from this place of comfort, up here in an interdimensional cloud and send them, a care package. It's like that doesn't really work because all of this is about actually facing all of those barriers. Like if you're going to run a marathon, you do it on a level playing field. Everyone else, like if it's raining that day, the rain affects you too, whatever. If there's whatever pollen in the air, you're breathing in that pollen too. So yeah. Oh, and I'll get into what are some things that we can do. So Flying Rainbow Lasagna meditation is one of the, best things. It doesn't cost money. It's just it's an idea, and it's something that you do with your body. So it's hugely empowering because you don't have to buy anything to do it. And that's one of the ways that we can reawaken our higher faculties. I do a lot with sun gazing also. Like that literally is where I get the energy to do everything that I do. To do artwork, music, broadcasts like this, the webinars. It's where I get the ideas and also the energy to do it, because there's a big difference between just, having an idea of a painting and actually taking a year to actually paint it. So yeah, all of this I get from sun gazing, and that is when I use my giant apparatus, my telescope, to connect to the sun. And it's like drinking energy directly from the sun instead of having to use an orange tree as an intermediary, or, a lettuce leaf as an intermediary. Just drink the energy directly in. And it also means that you can get a lot more energy than if you have to distill all of the energy out from a bunch of lettuce leaves or oranges or whatever, beef jerky slices or whatever you're eating. At a certain point, there's only so much roughage that you can put into your little intestinal system, and you're not going to get enough caloric and consciousness fuel to be able to do these maneuvers. So yeah, way back in Atlantis, that's the antediluvian, sophisticated, worldwide. When I say antediluvian, that means pre-flood, before everything got effed up down here. And this is what our culture was on this planet. Before our genes became degraded, everybody was a light eater, and we didn't have to kill another being in order to extend our own lives. And when you think about that, that's a profound change from what we are presently experiencing on Earth's surface. And that also means, as I was driving, doing some chores today, I was thinking about this. If you had, because one of these last white rhinos just died, I think it was a male or something like that. But it's like, now there is no more of that species because that one exemplar of that species has died. If you don't have death, you don't have to have many, many multiples. You don't have to have 10,000 flamingos. You don't have to have 10,000 polar bears. You really only need to have one or a few examples of what that organism can be. A lot of why we have a proliferation of so many of these organisms is because of death and the necessity of how do you keep each successive generation going? So you have to make sure that there are ample offspring, because some of them are going to die, in order to continue moving that particular song through time via the genetic lineage. Genes are literally how we transfer information through time. And that's another profound understanding. It's how we transfer our consciousness from moment to moment. Like we're jumping from, 12:57 to 12:58 to 12:59. And then all of a sudden it's 1 p.m. We're jumping from moment to moment. But we're also carrying information, and the information is more than just your protein structure. It's more than just the shape of your nose or color of your eyes. There's lots of other stuff that's also encoded in your DNA. So it's necessary to have 10,000 flamingos in case some of them die, and also so that some of them will mate and make new babies for the future and keep on keeping this song alive and reverberating. And that's, a very different approach than if there's no death. If there's no death, you don't have to have 10,000 flamingos. You just have as many flamingos as you need to express pure flamingo-ness, and then you don't have to keep on making more and more copies of it. What I'm trying to say is that in many ways, genetic proliferation is about having backups. Backups, back up your phone, back up your tablet, make sure in case you lose your hard drive that you've got that information saved. And if you know that the information is saved, then you don't have to have so many backups. But what I want to get to in this inspiration, encouragement section of this sharing here is the idea that although technology is being used and deployed to subvert consciousness and prevent the development and maturation of these higher faculties, it's quite inevitable, and we can all work together in order to make this process happen much faster. We can amplify with our minds together. And the we in that sentence is not merely humans. It's humans and dogs and cats and elephants and dolphins and redwood trees and microbes and even mineral life like crystals. Crystals can be little tiny grains of sand on a beach. Think about how many freaking grains of sand are on a beach. A lot. Or how many particles of soil are around your house. Or how many particles of soil make up a big giant mountain that is outside of your house. That's a lot. And each one of them is a living being. It's a mineral-based life form. And yet it is still alive, even though present science on Earth's surface does not recognize that. So what I was having this insight in meditation, because I was connecting beautifully with dolphins and some other organisms on the planet, this idea that we all hate being polluted. We all hate it. Everybody does. From, like I was saying, from the mineral microbes level to the macroscopic level, you and me and redwood trees and big giant blue whales, we all hate and despise this pollution and constraint. It's like we're really, really good musicians. We should be able to be in control of which notes we play and how long we sustain it and what's our melody and what's our beat and everything. We should be able to be choosing all of that as artists. And instead, what we have are these technological, out of tune, horribly sour notes that are being played. So the whole point is our natural magic is way more powerful than their technology-based magic, the dark magic that is Satanism. Our magic comes from having an innate divine connection, that comes from life force energy, that comes from connecting to, what I would call the divine or the source or the great composer, the great conductor, the higher dimensional organizing principle that is what makes all of this manifested, denser, slower stuff happen. That is way more powerful and inevitable, I keep using that word, than any of these technological, and the reason why is because we have coherence, and coherence is like what light waves have when they are focused in a laser beam. If you shoot a laser beam any place, it simply continues unabated in a perfectly straight line unless it meets an obstacle or something like that makes it dissipate or bounce. And that is what our cohesive mind / energy, true mind, not hacked human operating system, but true mind. When your energy is coherent and you're moving through time, you're part of the time field. Like when you're a little red blood cell doing your job, you're moving through the time field, you're part of the larger organism. That is much, much more powerful than any of these little bullies on the playground that are trying to control and constrain and limit who we are. And at this point, we're getting to be pretty mature, in spite of all of their efforts to keep us as, limited, little, easily bullied first graders. We're all maturing and gaining much more power and much more mental muscle power. And that means the capacity to manifest reality. Mental muscles and spiritual muscles is how we make events happen in time. So the more mature you become, the less you are like a ping pong ball, just bouncing here and there, hither, thither, and yon, and being like, oh, I'm not in control of my life, I hate everything. Like that, you become less like that, and you become more a responsible musician that says, oh, hey, I just played that note. It sounds horrible. I should really rewind, erase, and do something better, play something better. So that is, and a big part of this is we're innovating. In each moment, we natural beings are innovating. This is unpredictable, and we're also in uncharted territory. So that's why I also say, take all of your moldy old prophecies and throw them out the window. No offense to anyone. I know a lot of people are heavily invested religiously in things like the Bible and the Book of Revelation and stuff like that. Truly, it is all no longer relevant. Since the invention of the flying rainbow lasagna shape, all of these prophecies that were made pre-lasagna are no longer relevant because the lasagna shape is like a big giant improbability button. Press the button of improbable things and see what happens as a result. And what can happen as a result is, oh, look, all of these beings become mature. All of these beings awaken their higher faculties. All of these beings start to write their own music and sing their own songs, and it all sounds incredibly beautiful together. And that all of those beings doing that, it's not just humans. I'm just going to stress this point, to the point of ridiculousness. It's everything. It's plants and animals and microbes. And it's like, it's the best of the best. I was saying, I think that there are some lumpen organisms or some, lazy, unreliable microbes or mice or, little tiny ones or even lumpen big ones. But the point is they're not on board. They're not part of the band. If you don't want to practice, if you don't want to play your instrument, if you don't want to actually get up and do the exercise, it's easy. You don't get to be part of the band. And again, so I had to learn people are on this planet and they're all programmed by all this Book of Revelation stuff. And they're like, oh, and that means they'll burn in hell, right, Aurora? I'm like, no, actually, it doesn't mean they'll burn in hell. What it means is that they'll go into a state of entropy. So there's all these different musicians at different levels of playing. And the really good virtuosos are gathering together and amplifying one another and moving into this incredibly, what would be called a magical realm, but just because many people use the word magic or miracle to describe something that would have seemed impossible or, not possible under the previous limitations. So think of it as like an unlimited realm where your imagination is free to flow, your consciousness is free to flow, and you don't face any of the whatever sandbags tied around your feet that prevented you from being able to move and do stuff in the past. But what, oh what, Aurora, is going to happen to the people that haven't done their homework? Are they going to burn in hell? Well, like I was saying, no, I don't perceive that at all. I perceive that there are other, pockets of reality that can be occupied so that everybody can learn their life lessons. However, many organisms are on the road to entropy. And this is also what is embodied by the flying rainbow lasagna shape, that we have these two directions or two vertices, pointy spots that you can move towards. And one of them is a state of total energy, and one of them is a state of total entropy. And total energy means like basically, rejoining with divinity. It's everythingness. It's total intelligence. It's total energy. It's having all of the vital life force energy in the world, being the richest person in the world, and all of us are there. And then there's the opposite, which is having no energy, not moving through the time field. The gas in your car. There's no more gas in the car. You can't move anymore. That's what I see as really happening to these lumpen or unworthy or not well-formed aspects of consciousness, that they don't get to keep on moving through time. That moving through time is actually a type of privilege reserved only for organisms that are doing and saying and thinking and feeling and being the right way. And being the right way, this is all of this personal integrity. You are integrated as an individual with the whole. That's what I'm trying to say about my collective. Like, I'm an individual and I'm perfectly integrated with the whole of my collective. So just like in your body, there's cell specialization. You've got a heart cell. Cardiac cell is different than a cell that is tooth enamel. They're two different types of body cells. And you don't want to have teeth in your heart. You don't want to have a beating blood cell in your mouth. You want to have everything that is, a specialized thing doing its specialty. So I'm doing my specialty. I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do, as are all of the other cells that are part of this much larger organism that is the organism that whatever is my origins and my collective. And the collective is not from one particular star either. It's like from Betelgeuse or Arcturus or any famous brand name star. Because, there's a lot of stars in the sky that aren't brand name. They're just like, C3, 4, 5, 7 or something like that. They're not named something fun. And when people are like, oh yes, where's your, when people say they're a star seed, it's like, where are you from? It's always someplace brand name. It's just really funny in that way. But my collective contains consciousnesses from all sorts of different places and all sorts of different, levels of time and experience. And because those are like the best musicians out of each context has come to join this particular advanced jazz band. And so a lot of it has to do with becoming sensitive to other musicians. Like, what are these other organisms? What is their background like? What motivates them? Because if you're a drummer, then you have to listen to the piano. If you're a piano, you have to listen to the vocalist. All of these organisms have to listen and integrate well together. So we are on this planet Earth moving towards greater freedom, and there's many other planets that are also enslaved, and our journey here is profoundly connected to their journey elsewhere. So thank you for being with me on this journey. I know that there's always more to say, so I'll speak more next week about all these different planets and stars that are